Greetings, this is Mr. Nobody with part 2 of my series about the events of January 6th and understanding those events. But I'm continuing leading up to it. You see, there are more ways to cheat an election besides dicking around with the counting process. That's just the last stage. But there's a whole lot of other stuff, and all of it needs to be brought in. Somewhere along the way, though, Trump made somebody else's shit list. And we all know when that happened. He went to this World Economic Forum. They invited him. Maybe because he was now president of the United States. They go there, and he's hearing these guys out. He really didn't know what they were about before, and he was kind of indifferent to the whole thing. Okay, I'm invited. I'm going to hobnob with a bunch of MAGA multi-billionaires like myself. Why not? He goes. And he's hearing what the awful and ghastly plans these characters have. And by the time it gets his turn to speak, he gets up there and states in no uncertain terms that they're not going to be allowed to touch his America. They can go pound sand. And that's all. Good for him on that. Yeah, make those characters pound sand because they have no right in any moral sense to tell the rest of the world how to destroy itself. So, and Trump's not going to let them in, and so forth. Well, this was war. So, unfortunately, these same billionaires, they control corporations, they control, a lot of the world of business and finance. Not all of it, but enough of it to, you could really clobber somebody very bad. Deprive somebody of advertisers to even making corporations that supposedly, and up until that point, had functioned for the bottom line. Now suddenly they are not interested in the bottom line. They're interested in making themselves into instruments of propaganda. Leftist, communist, stark raving, propaganda. They'd rather do that than have a nice bottom line. The bottom line means nothing to them. So, screwing their shareholders, screwing their workers, screwing their customer base, screwing the whole world. Why big companies want to do that? Because they're told to do this by their billionaire pseudo-friends among the World Economic Forum and whatever equivalents and the Davos and all these groups. They want the world to be a bad place, a terrible, soulless, brainless place where it's just nothing but misery. Not even heroic suffering, just pointless misery. That's what they want. So, and there was, oh yeah, okay, aye, chief, yeah, let's do this. Let's ruin stuff. So that's when the war on Trump becomes much bigger scale. So this has gone way out. I mean, Trump won. I was surprised. I didn't think it happened. I mean, it even crossed my mind, did somebody get into the voting machines or something? Because, but somehow that idea just died. I mean, it died fast. No one wanted to think about, maybe Trump's people got into the voting machines and tweaked the counts somehow. Somehow that idea just died so fast. Don't know why. There it is. So what did that leave? Well, like I said, now that he'd won, he'd been sworn in, he's president. Hillary Clinton had conceded. That was over. But now Trump had to fight somebody else. He had to fight, his rival is no longer Hillary Clinton, his opponent. I mean, she may be perfectly happy to still try to destroy him and slow him down and stuff. But she's gone from being, at or very close to the core of this thing, this attack on him, to now being a minor player in something that's suddenly gotten a whole lot bigger. These guys pushing their ESG agenda on as many businesses and whoever are foolish enough to do business with that, a model like that. And, may every business that embraces that just go totally bankrupt as soon as possible. This America prays. I pray and all of America prays. Dear God, help every company that goes with ESG either abandon it at once if they're so foolish to run along with it, or else go bankrupt in mighty short order. Because, well, that prayer one can actually expect because they do go down. We all saw recently what happened with Bud Light when they decided to get all woke and so forth, and toxically politically correct, which is really the same thing. You say, what happened? You know? And every country, every company, every business that does that, you know, ought to go through the same stuff. You know, suddenly they can't give away their product. They really should, because it's just criminal. It is criminal. And Trump was not going to let that into this country. He's going to protect this country. You know, I mean, he's not kidding when he says he's the one thing standing between what they want to do, and all of us who are the real target. You know, it's just that they'll have to go through him first. He really, you know, that's not just rhetoric. That really is how it is. So now the big guns are now trained on him. This Russia thing is opportune. They use it. They push it. They finally end up doing this whole Mueller thing and investigations. And funny thing, you know, real investigations proceed very quietly. Very quietly. You never really know who or what they're investigating, you know, until they've got the results and they come out, and even then you might hear about it in trial somewhere. But here, it was like, we've got stuff. We've got the goods on it. No, they didn't. They never had the goods on it because there's no goods to have on him. So they moved closer to the time. Oh, and there were those impeachments. Yeah. Well, let's look at the first one. You know, an interesting piece of information emerged during that. They were accusing Trump of doing this quid pro quo. He didn't. In fact, that whole phone call, he just did the obvious, smart thing. Here's the whole thing. Here it all is. See for yourself. He said, nothing wrong. He called it perfect. In other words, there's nothing wrong with it. It's legitimate. It's reasonable. Everything he said was legal. And there's no quid pro quo anywhere in that. I mean, just look at the text for yourself. It's been out there. I don't know if you can find it now. Probably not. But at the time, it was available. Maybe some archivist has kept it. You may have to do some digging now. It might still exist somewhere. Some right-wing archivist captured it, even if nobody else has it. And it was a perfect call. But meanwhile, there was Biden there joking and laughing about, yeah, I wanted their prosecutor to be fired. And I said, well, you know, you can have billions of dollars coming to you, but you're not going to get it unless you fire that prosecutor. And guess what? He was fired, see? He just admitted to quid pro quo, the very thing. In short, the very thing that Trump was accused of, that in itself is an admission, is a confession. It's a confession. You know, I mean, actually, what more do you need? Well, actually, there is a lot more. But, you know, the murderer has confessed. You know, that the evidence also points to him is probably good because, I mean, yeah, we know there could be false confessions and so on, but you know, but the evidence was really there. You know, we didn't have it at that time. We just saw this guy, this old, you know, at the time, you know, ex-vice president joking about how he could, you know, do this quid pro quo to the government of the brain. And everyone just kind of looked at that and said, so freaking what? We don't care. Oh, well, if you're not, yeah, they don't care. Unless it's Trump. Yeah, it's, you know, Trump is guilty of being orange. That's it, you know? In a different era, it was a different color, but it amounts to the same thing. You know? That's why color blindness is falling out of fashion these days. How you're going to have a prejudice against orange people unless you stop being colorblind. Okay. getting back to leading up to the events. So they kept that going as long as they could. They sustained it as long as they could, but ultimately, at some point, Mr. Mueller had to come out with something. And I mean, it was just how many pages of, well, we looked into this and that, and it was really interesting, and we pursued it, and we talked to this person and that person, and we studied this thing and that thing, and da 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 da. And then we looked at this thing. Wait a minute. Oh, what was the result? I don't think he says. I don't know. Maybe at some point he does, but there was nothing to find. Nothing. And now with the Durham report, we understand. Not only was there really nothing, the Durham really did what Mueller should have done. He really digs into the whole thing. And what was the whole idea of this thing? The whole object was to spy on Trump's campaign, just like Nixon. It was the way for Hillary's side, regardless of how much or little her personal involvement may or may not have been, her side, as it were, of the aisle, to spy on the Trump campaign, no different than how Richard Nixon spied on the McGovern campaign in 1972. No difference. It's exactly the same thing. I mean, we look back on it now, and it's like, why was that such a big deal? I mean, all's fair in love, war, and elections. Isn't it? I mean, there wasn't anything Nixon needed from McGovern's plans. He didn't need that. He was just darn popular enough to get elected in a landslide because he was doing a good job. And America could see that. So they said, yeah, paraphrase Wag the Dog, why trade horses in midstream? So, but now, all of that kind of becomes anticlimactic. Well, then they had to start coming up with other stuff. It comes, it goes, I don't even remember. And the thing was, it was always, the lies go first, and the truth always comes limping along far behind, story of everything. But that was happening. It was even beginning to happen by the 2020 election, which is barely getting started. Where we're, okay, so the Russia thing, long and tedious as it was, the whole thing for the Mueller report really came down to there was nothing there. So, now Durham's dug into all the details that Mueller should have dug into and reached the same conclusion. I think with better evidences, but basically it's the same thing. Because they also looked into a lot of other things, like why was this going on? How was this going on? Who was this Christopher Steele? Or Durham was looking into all that good stuff, which, the Mueller thing didn't even think about. He didn't dare. It was all those parts of it all were the blind spots of the Mueller investigation. So, now we're getting up closer. Alright, I'm going to mention out something very important. There are 3 goals that were operative here. A very short-term goal, a medium-term goal, and a long-term goal. And this 3-way way of splitting stuff demonstrates what has come out and when and why. What was the shortest-term goal? Well, the shortest-term goal really had to do with the medium-term goal. So I'm going to focus on the medium-term goal next, and then we'll get to the long-term after that, because the long-term is the real factor for January 6th. But the medium-term was, what did they want to do this time around? They wanted to destroy Trump, to get Trump, as Dershowitz so inspiredly explains it in the title of his recent book, Get Trump, By the way, it's a good book, and I think I can recommend it. Dershowitz is not a Trump supporter, but he is a fanatic for the constitutional law, and obviously at least that much has to be respected. So, anyway, just thought I'd put in a teeny tiny plug. Alright, but going back to the build-up of this thing. Well, This Hunter Biden laptop, it was actually known. The FBI had this thing and the physical artifact. They knew where it came from. They knew how it came there. They came to them. Here's this guy who runs a little computer shop somewhere in Delaware, mind you, practically barely down the street from where the Bidens live. And Hunter left it there for some routine maintenance or some sort of thing. He goes and does that, and it's not really his business to look at what's on there, but some of it just can't help but pop up or something, and there's stuff on there. And it occurs to him, this might be something really important. He captures it. He saves it. He offers to return the thing, but he keeps it on hand for, in case Hunter ever comes by and collect it, he can take it. Come and take it. You copy it because you got to rehost everything on the drive to a new drive. So it's just actually part of a stage of that. That's why there's a copy of it laying around. Later on, it occurred to him this might be of some interest, that maybe I'd better get a copy of this as a protection for myself, before I hand, this original copy made in the process of copying off of this old drive onto a new drive that goes into this laptop, so that he'll have everything there and it's all been cleaned up, rebooted, defragmented, and all those other things that they do in computers to make them run faster and better and fix whatever problems they're having. So that's his job. That's what he does. He's got this thing. Hunter, well, he's so stoned out of his head all the time, he doesn't even, if it crosses his mind, where's my laptop? I don't know. Never mind, I'll buy another one. So, Hunter Biden never came back for it. But somehow, he said, I've seen this. I didn't mean to look at it. There's some suspicious stuff on it. And he actually went to the FBI and said, hey, you guys, here's this thing. Here's how this got here. Take a look. And the thing is, there's imagery. And, is it photoshopped? Now, mind you, the Russian communists could be real skilled in doing Photoshop and putting somebody's face on a picture of somebody else doing something. They do have a knack for that sort of thing. But you can always look at the graphics of the image itself. When somebody photoshops, there are traces of it. There are lines where it transitions from the native picture to the inserted picture. There's digital and visual artifacts that show up, no matter how well you can make them hard to see or almost invisible to the human eye just looking at this picture. It's sort of like the Obama birth certificate, and you're just casually looking at, oh, there it is, fine, check off that detail and move on. If Obama had only doctored that thing up before he ran for president and still waiting until somebody said, hey, where's your birth certificate? Well, okay, that's another subject. He could probably have spared himself a lot of agony, and maybe nobody would ever have looked at it that closely. Well, it's easy to verify that there were none of those kinds of artifacts like Photoshop or other, software to manipulate a graphic image. None of those artifacts were present. And so there was not only the pictures, there's tons of emails full of very real details about how the Biden family and their contacts and how they talk to each other and all this kind of stuff. And, most of which is kind of more or less normal, roughly, I'd say innocent, relatively speaking, material. But it's all there, it's all real, and they had to have known it was real. You can talk to this guy, they can interview him. This is exactly how it came to me. Here's the receipt with Biden's signature on it when he dropped it off, and he signed this order, and I agreed to fix it for so much dollars, and that he could collect it on such and such a day. There it all is, everything all where it should be. And so they knew it was real. And when we get to the part where where all these 51 intelligence people were, I don't know, some of them were bribed, some of them were fooled, some of them just, for whatever personal reason, had it in for Trump. Who knows? You know, they're prejudiced against orange people or something. Who knows? Whatever. One thing, hook or by crook, 51 of these characters were rounded up and made to sign something that half of them didn't believe in, and the other half didn't care what it said anyway. They just would have stuck their name on just any old thing without knowing or caring what it is. And it says, here's 51 intelligence agencies who says it's all just Russian propaganda. Oh, well, finally, now, only in 2020 is there supposedly a bit of Russian propaganda finally identified. Only it isn't. And they knew it wasn't. They knew it wasn't. Even some of those 51 agents knew it wasn't. But they signed it anyway. Like I said, they were bribed, coerced, maneuvered, pressured, and some of them just plain old had a bias that they were just, happy to carry out, no matter what, without any connection to it. It doesn't need to be true. People will think it's true, and I'll put my name on it. They think like that. Yes, they do. Yes, they do. So, anyone who knows any of these characters well knows that is how they are. So, they hid that. And they hid that very, very well. So, we're now coming up to the key points here. So, that is hidden. It has been said that would make that if only that had been widely known rather than carefully concealed, it would easily have given Trump anywhere from an additional 4% to 16% of the American populace. Enough to make it, maybe even enough to make it impossible to conceal his win. So, that was very relevant. So, between trying to destroy him with this whole, fake impeachment thing, the second comes after the election, so that's just being silly and excessive. But the first one was an attempt to destroy his re-election chances. As we saw, it didn't work. You see, the whole Russia thing itself, a few other things were come up with. I forget what they were, but it was all more of the same. They make this stuff up, and it takes a while for the truth to come limping along behind to show, no, that either that didn't happen or it wasn't what it was made out to be, and so forth. So, all of this stuff, and like I said, all the news organizations, that people, we may know that they're biased. We kind of get used to that fact. We kind of accept that fact. But this was going way beyond mere bias. There's bias reporting, and then there's inflammatory. This was beyond even the yellow journalism that was so famous more than 100 years ago, when the Hearst Corporation was still trying to grow itself money-wise by just printing all, this went even beyond that. These stories were just, to try to destroy Trump were just inflammatory. And, of course, entirely bogus. You weren't getting unbiased news. You were getting worse than biased. So, you've got all of this, print, TV, and so forth. And just a few teeny tiny, alternative media kind of bringing out the truth, which, still at that time had almost no audience. So, we now are getting up towards the next part of the attempt to steal the election. The first part is based on all of this background stuff. And no one can deny that this has happened. And indeed, a lot of it now can come out. Because the second priority, the middle one, was to make sure Trump is ejected from the White House. The middle one. I'll start the next section with the 3 priorities.